So 250 years ago, right now, the revolution was well underway. The American Revolution had been started. The Continental Congress was meeting in this building, Independence Hall. And one thing I've been doing every day is just checking letters that the Founding Fathers wrote back and forth to each other. So I figured I'd check today and see if I find anything interesting and share it with you. I've got my laptop right here. So I'm gonna be looking down and checking for letters. Okay, let's go to July 3rd. And on July 3rd, looks like there were 4 documents here. 4 Pennsylvania delegates to Congress, in Congress to the Philadelphia Committee of Inspection and Observation. Seems like not a letter, but an official document. And then Cotton Tufts to John Adams on 3rd of July. General Orders, 3rd of July. Address from the Massachusetts Provincial Congress, 3rd of July. So it seems like there are 3 official documents and 1 letter. So let's start with the 1 letter and then we will go from there. Okay, let's see here. Let's click into Cotton Tufts to John Adams, 3rd of July, 1775. Dear Sir, let's see how long this is. Ooh, this is a nice long letter. Weymouth, July 3rd, 1775. Dear Sir, you have no doubt long before this heard of the unhappy fate of Charlestown, its destruction by fire, the forcing of our entrenchments there by the ministerial troops, and the loss of our valuable friend, Dr. Warren, who was shot through the breast and soon expired. The entrenchments were unfinished, the work of but one night. However, they were gallantly defended, and by all accounts, there was an amazing destruction amongst the British troops, a victory brought at the dearest rate, and if all their victories are thus bought, they will exactly resemble the soldier who conquers, but in the contest receives a wound of which he afterwards dies. The lowest account of their loss amounts to 1,000 killed and wounded, and the greater part of those who have come out of Boston since the engagement report from 1,300 to 1,400, and some have gone as far as 1,800. On our side, about 50 were killed. From 25 to 30 prisoners, mostly wounded, 100 and upwards wounded who returned from the battle. Of the killed, wounded, and those that were made prisoners, I believe they don't exceed 200, which, considering the amazing disadvantages they were under, surrounded almost on every side, exposed to the fire of the army, ships, and floating batteries, blinded and choked with the smoke of the town, that it seems almost miraculous so few were killed and wounded. Not above 800 or 900 of our men were engaged in this battle, and the British troops were from 3,000 to 5,000, according to the best accounts we can get. Could you, my friend, send us a recipe for the destruction of those vermin that float on the water and spit out their venom, fire, and rage against us? It is probable we should maintain our ground and make a pretty good figure amongst the warriors and heroes of this age. But they sadly worry us. All our harbors are sealed. No provision vessel enters. Queer how our ordnance stores to get in. Maybe query? Since the engagement, our forces have been very industrious in entrenching and fortifying at Roxbury, Cambridge, and in the environs of Charlestown. This morning, we hear from McNeil, a rope maker who got out of Boston yesterday, that in the late battle, 90 commissioned or 180 and 190 non-commissioned officers of the British troops were wounded and slain. What must then be the number of privates? Colonel Bruce, Major Pitcairn, Major Small, Major Sheriff are said to be amongst the dead. These are mentioned by those that come from town. But all accounts from that quarter are to be received cum grano salis. For the inhabitants of the town at present are in the most abject state imaginable under military law, insulted, afraid to stir, move, or ask questions. However, what I have mentioned in the former part of this letter relative to the destruction of the British troops is perhaps well grounded, as it is supported by accounts from J. Bradford, King, Cochrane, Bartlett, and John Thomas of Plymouth, McNeill, and sundry others who have come out at different times since the engagement, and by Hartley from Hospital Island, who was sent here last week by the select men of Boston, at the desire, as they say, of 25 prisoners from the country, and many of them dangerously wounded, for fresh provision. By the advice of Congress, some fresh provision was sent. This same Hartley, alias his wife, has been at Weymouth twice since the engagement and confirmed the above accounts. Having told you what there seems to be pretty good authority for, I will mention some things that I cannot vouch for but are commonly talked of, vis-a-vis the General Burgoyne has not been seen since the battle. Some say that he was slain, others that he immediately embarked for England, that 250 soldiers' widows were sent to England or Ireland in a transport ship, General Gage not being able to support them in Boston. If true, methinks these will be weighty preachers. That 40 or 50 ton of powder has got into New York, that the Rhode Islanders are fitting privateers, etc., etc. We were not long since told that in that vessel, which was brought into Philadelphia with Colonel Skene, were 70 chests of arms. Pray let me know where it was a fact. You complain in a letter to your bosom friend that your former correspondents have forgot you. You see by this that one at least bears you in remembrance, and if you will accept this as it is without being transcribed and with its length, I'll promise you a shorter one in life and health permits, if life and health permits, by future conveyance. My health has been declining. The alarms we have had here and the multiplicity of care and business that devolved on me in consequence of them, with the infirmities of body, have almost destroyed me. This fortnight past, I have recruited much, a general time of health. No reigning disorder except the rash which is in almost every town. The season has been very dry, from Boston to Scituate on the seashore, extending about 10 miles back. In Weymouth, not more than half the hay on upland that was produced last year. Your land produces hay in plenty, dry or wet. That I trust you will have enough for yourself and some for your neighbors. Yours, your father Smith's, and my family are well. It would be agreeable to hear from you, and to be informed what is in agitation in your grand assembly, etc., that heaven may inspire you all with wisdom and make you happily instrumental of the salvation of America, is the ardent wish and prayer of, dear sir, your friend and humble servant, Cotton Tufts. And then June, i.e. July 4th. Dr. Sir, I am this moment informed that your Congress in settlement of the generals have made Colonel Heath superior in command to General Thomas, a measure which has given great concern to the most sensible and judicious, and probably you will have applications for the reversal of it. The latter is said to be judicious, steady, and unruffled, the former a theoretical officer, and further they say not. I heard this from a gentleman direct from headquarters, well acquainted with the sentiments of the most discerning, and is himself a man of distinguished ability and a warm friend to the cause. Indeed, the sense of the Congress upon this point may be fully collected in their late appointment of Dr. Warren to a command in the Army Superior to Colonel Heath, yours ut supra. Footnote number 1. Of the 8 Continental Brigadier Generals appointed by Congress on 22nd of June, 3 were Massachusetts men: Seth Pomeroy, ranking 1st, William Heath, ranking 4th, and John Thomas, ranking 6th. This meant that Heath had been jumped over over Thomas, his senior in the Massachusetts service. Happily, Pomeroy, a tired old veteran, never took up his Continental command. On the recommendation of Washington, and by motion of John Adams, Congress, on 19th of July, promoted Thomas to Pomeroy's place as 1st Brigadier General. See also French, first year. Okay. Okay, next, let's click into these documents. I'm not sure what we're getting ourselves into with these, so let's take a look. You can hear the people telling stories shouting that the stories will begin soon. Okay, this looks fairly manageable. Let's just read it real quick, I guess. 4 Pennsylvania delegates in Congress to the Philadelphia Committee of Inspection and Observation around this time, 3rd or to 5th of July, 1777. Philip Skene had made this is an introduction, I guess, from the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. Philip Skene had made a protracted visit to England and Ireland. During it, he had furnished information in the ministry and been rewarded with appointments as Inspector of Crown Lands and Lieutenant Governor of Ticonderoga and Crown Point. When he returned to America, he landed in Philadelphia, where he was promptly arrested on suspicion that Whitehall had sent him to bribe delegates. Congress appointed a committee to examine his papers, and on 27th of June ordered him sent under guard to Connecticut. The Pennsylvania delegation was charged with handling the matter. On July 5th, a companion of his by the name of Lundy was ordered to go with him. The Pennsylvania delegates apparently began to carry out their commission on July 3rd, and then, when Lundy was added 2 days later, hastily revised their letter to make it apply to both men. Okay, so that's an explanation of this. Philadelphia, July 3rd to 5th, 1775. By order of the Continental Congress, the committee the city of Philadelphia are earnestly recommended immediately to convey Major Philip Skene and Mr. Lundy and deliver them to the Committee of New York, who are requested to convey him to Hartford in Connecticut, there to deliver him and the order of Congress to the committee of that town, and that this be done in the most effectual manner and the utmost care taken that he does not escape. The expenses will be paid by Congress. Ben Franklin, George Ross, John Dickinson, James Wilson. Endorsed on July 3rd, B. Franklin, George Ross, John Dickinson, and James Wilson, order to convey Major Skene and Mr. Lundy to New York. This is the predecessor of the committee to which Ben Franklin was elected in August. This line at the end of the document is in Ben Franklin's hand. The text itself is in Ross's and may have been written as early as June 27th. The emendations to include Lundy must have been made on or soon after July 5th. Ross's texts read, "At this point, Skene to the Committee of Trenton that they desired to deliver him, etc., and was replaced by Mr. Lundy. Him here and in deliver him below was turned into them." I like that. They just put a T in front of him to create them. Ross and Wilson were prominent lawyers, one in Lancaster and the other in Carlisle, and were chairmen of their local committees and colonels in the associators. Ross served with Ben Franklin on the Committee of Safety. Wilson, one of the outstanding legal scholars in the colonies, had recently published a pamphlet that attracted wide attention by denying Parliament's authority in America. For both men, see the DAB. Okay, next let's see what these general orders were. Okay, so the footnotes are longer than the actual text. Classic. Let's see now. General orders. Headquarters, Cambridge, July 3rd, 1775. Countersign, sharp. Parole, look out. The colonels or commanding officers of the regiment are ordered forthwith to make 2 returns of the number of men in their respective regiments, distinguishing such as are sick, wounded, or absent on furlough, and also the quantity of ammunition each regiment now has. It appearing by the report of Henry Woods, the officer of the main guard, that one William Alfred is confined for taking 2 horses belonging to some persons in Connecticut, but that he has made satisfaction to the injured parties, who request that they may not be longer detained as witnesses. It is ordered that he be discharged, and after receiving a severe reprimand, be turned out of camp. After orders, 4:00 p.m. It is ordered that Colonel Glover's regiment be ready this evening, with all their accoutrements, to march at a minute's warning to support General Folsom of the New Hampshire forces in case his lines should be attacked. It is also ordered that Colonel Prescott regiment equip themselves, march this evening, and take possession of the woods leading to Leechmore's Point, and in case of an attack, then Colonel Glover's regiment to march immediately to their support. Okay, these are general orders. So let's see what the explanation is here. The read copy includes only after orders, okay. Addressed to Mr. Henshaw, Adjutant General. George Washington, okay, one second. George Washington and Charles Lee reached Cambridge about midday on Sunday, 2nd of July. Quote, the greatest civility and attention was paid to the generals on their arrival at the camp, end quote, wrote an anonymous correspondent on 3rd of July. Pennsylvania Gazette, Philadelphia, 12th July, 1775. On the morning of 2nd of July, the troops in Cambridge assembled on the parade ground to receive George Washington and Lee, but were dismissed before the generals arrived because of the onset of a rainstorm that lasted until dark. The next day, Lieutenant Paul Lunt, who was posted in Cambridge with Colonel Moses Little's Massachusetts regiment, wrote in his journal, quote, turned out early in the morning, got in readiness to be reviewed by the general, new orders given out by General Washington. Lieutenant Joseph Hodgkins, also of Little's regiment, wrote to his wife at 8 a.m. on 3rd of July, quote, I have nothing remarkable to write except that General Washington and Lee's got into Cambridge yesterday, and today they are to take a view of ye army, and that will be attended with a great deal of grandeur. There is at this time 21 drummers and as many feffers abetting and playing round the parade. Private James Stevens noted in his journal entry for 3rd of July that nothing happened extraordinarily. We paraded 3 times. Upon arriving at Cambridge, George Washington and Charles Lee took up residence at the house of the president of Harvard College, Samuel Langdon, located on Harvard Square. The Massachusetts Provincial Congress, in its deliberations of 26th of June, agreed to give the two generals the use of the entire house, except for one room that was reserved for Langdon. On 6th of July, the Provincial Congress instructed the Massachusetts Committee of Safety to inquire of George Washington and Lee if there was any other house at Cambridge that would be more agreeable to them. And within the next 2 days, George Washington decided to move into the elegant mansion belonging to John Vassall, a wealthy Tory who earlier in the year had gone to Boston for refuge. Vassall's house, which stands about a half a mile west of Harvard College, was cleaned for George Washington by 15th of July and was probably occupied by him at that time. It remained George Washington's headquarters until the following spring. Charles Lee established himself at Medford, 4 miles north of Cambridge, sometime before 26th of July. First footnote, Henry Wood was a major in Colonel William Prescott's Massachusetts Regiment. Second footnote, the Reed copy reads, "Attack there." Third footnote, in the weeks following the Battle of Bunker Hill, the American army outside of Boston was frequently alarmed by rumors of another British attack. South of the city, Roxbury and Dorchester Heights were the most likely places for an assault, while to the north, Prospect Hill, Winter Hill, and Lechmere's Point all lay within easy striking distance of the British lines on Bunker Hill. Winter Hill, the position occupied by Major General Nathaniel Folsom and his New Hampshire troops, was particularly vulnerable to attack because it was flanked on the north by the Mystic River, up which the British might move the 3 floating batteries that they had anchored near the mouth of that river. The lines on Winter Hill, furthermore, were at this time deficient in both men and heavy artillery, a state of affairs about which General Folsom wrote to his colony's Committee of Safety on 1st of July, 1775, quote, "Wednesday last, 20th of June, the whole of the New Hampshire troops fit for duty were ordered to their alarum posts. When I found that we were not able to line our breastwork more than 2 deep, our lines being necessarily extensive on account of the situation of our camp, therefore desired that the 2 remaining companies now stationed at Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and Hampton, New Hampshire, may be sent, if you can possibly spare them. There being not 1/4 part of the troops in ours, as in the other lines at Cambridge, Roxbury, and on Prospect Hill. In a few days the breastwork will be completed, by which time the cannon I wrote for, I hope, will arrive, so that we may be prepared to give the ministerial troops a proper reception should they attempt to force our lines." Lechmere's Point, located about 2 miles east of Cambridge by land and about a half a mile southwest of Bunker Hill by water, was an obvious landing place for any British force sent to attack Cambridge, despite the fact that the marsh behind the point flooded during high tides, making it, in effect, an island. A false report that British regulars were landing at Lechmere's Point alarmed the Cambridge camp on 3rd of June, and on 4th of July, a response to another alarm, an American working party was sent to entrench Lechmere's Point. Colonel John Glover and Colonel William Prescott commanded Massachusetts regiments stationed at Cambridge. Okay, let's look at the final document for today, the address from the Massachusetts Provincial Congress, 3rd of July, 1775. Address from the Massachusetts Provincial Congress, Watertown, Massachusetts, 3rd of July, 1775. May it please your excellency. The Congress of the Massachusetts colony, impressed with every sentiment of gratitude and respect, beg leave to congratulate you on your safe arrival, and to wish you all imaginable happiness and success in the execution of the important duties of your elevated station. While we applaud that attention to the public good manifested in your appointment, we equally admire that disinterested virtue and distinguished patriotism, which alone could call you from those enjoyments of domestic life which a sublime and manly taste manly taste, joined with a most affluent fortune, can afford, to hazard your life and to endure the fatigues of war in the defense of the rights of mankind and for the good of your country. The laudable zeal for the common cause of America, the compassion for the distresses of this colony, exhibited by the great dispatch made in your journey hither, fully justifies the universal satisfaction we have with pleasure observed on this occasion, and we are promising presages that the great expectations formed from your personal character and military abilities are well founded. We wish you may have found such regularity and discipline already established in the army as may be agreeable to your expectation. The hurry with which it was necessarily collected, and the many disadvantages arising from a suspension of government under which we have raised and endeavored to regulate the forces of this colony, have rendered it a work of time, and though in a great measure effected, the completion of so difficult and at the same time so necessary a task is reserved to your excellency, and we doubt not will be properly considered and attended to. We would not presume to prescribe to your excellency, but supposing you would choose to be informed of the general character of the soldiers who compose this army, beg leave to represent that the greatest part of them have not before seen service. And although naturally brave and of good understanding, yet for want of experience in military life, have but little knowledge of diverse things most essential to the preservation of health and even of life. The youth in the army are not possessed of the absolute necessity of cleanliness in their dress and lodging, continual exercise, and strict temperance to preserve them from diseases frequently prevailing in camps, especially among those who, from their childhood, have been used to a laborious life. We beg leave to assure you that this Congress will, at all times, be ready to attend to such requisitions as you may have occasion to make us, and to contribute all the aid in our power to the cause of America and your happiness and ease in the discharge of the duties of your exalted office. We must fervently implore Almighty God that the blessings of divine providence may rest on you, that your head may be covered in the day of battle, that every necessary assistance may be afforded, and that you may be long continued in life and health, a blessing to mankind. The document at the Huntington Library is endorsed in General George Washington's writing, indicating that it was the copy he received. On 29th of June, the Massachusetts Provincial Congress, sitting at Watertown, appointed James Warren, Joseph Hawley, William Whiting, Daniel Hopkins, and Jonathan Greenleaf as, quote, a committee to prepare an address to Generals Washington and Lee to be presented to them on their arrival here, end quote. The committee prepared 2 addresses, one to each general, apparently completing its work by 1st of July, when Joseph Hawley, Samuel Dexter, and John Pickering, Jr. were ordered, quote, to draw up a resolve to be prefixed to the addresses, end quote. The following resolution, dated 3rd of July, 1775, appears before the address to George Washington in the document at the Huntington Library. Quote, resolved that the Honorable and the President James Warren, Honorable Major Joseph Hawley, Mr. John Pickering, Jr., Colonel Ezra Richmond, Dr. John Taylor, Mr. George Partridge, and Mr. Samuel Phillips be a committee of this Congress to present the following addresses to His Excellency George Washington. Quote, end quote. This resolution does not appear in the draft or in the journal of the Provincial Congress. It is not known either when or where the committee presented the address to George Washington. Okay, those are the letters from July 3rd, 1775. If you liked them, please leave a like and a subscribe, and we'll read the next batch tomorrow. Bye.